22.2 miles an hour. That's what Chandler Smith said he ran, or at least what he posted to his Instagram briefly on earlier this week. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was the speed difference and how you can really tell the difference between Georgia, the SEC, and everybody else out there. I've got a few things to say. Like, for instance, a year ago, Keely Ringo had one of the faster times. Arian Smith had one of the faster times. But Smith's today was as fast as almost anybody around. So if you're looking for some speed for the Dogs, again, it's not, I mean, they've already got one Smith that can really roll past people and Arian Smith, but now Chandler Smith is another. When you're watching Georgia and Michigan play earlier this year, okay, it wasn't just Jordan knocking people out. It wasn't just Jordan. It wasn't just James Cook. Although James Cook was pretty fast. Hard not to notice. Pick up that DAWGSTRUCTION right down below. Thanks everybody for ordering it. You're not going to want to miss out on DAWGSTRUCTION. But one thing that happened in that Michigan game was the straight up speed of Georgia compared to Michigan. And when you're talking to folks off the record, behind the scenes, they knew immediately. And this is actually one thing that's at the beginning of the story about the Michigan game. I wasn't planning on doing this as much, but let me just read to you just a section here on this. Going on to the Michigan game, Georgia's coaching staff thought the Dogs were the better team. The concern about Michigan, was about if Michigan could play as well as Alabama did in the championship game. They were good enough to beat us if they played really well, and we didn't, one assistant said before the trip to South Florida. The Dogs were considered a touchdown favorite to beat Michigan, yada, yada, yada. So the week before, or excuse me, right before the game, everybody is watching Michigan warm up, and that's when there was now the players felt like they would win the game. But there wasn't as much faith in the players because they had just gotten beat up by Alabama a month before. But when some of the people at Georgia were watching Michigan warm up, they knew they were in good shape for that game. And it goes back to something that Wan'Dale Robinson said. Now, you're not going to remember who Wan'Dale Robinson is, but when Kentucky and Georgia played, Wan'Dale Robinson was one of the few guys at Kentucky that the Georgia staff was concerned about in terms of just the ability to make plays. Well, Wan'Dale Robinson was at the draft combine today, or this week. I'm going to say this week. And, he played at Nebraska before he went to Kentucky. And he really had a good time. I mean, he really had a good season at Kentucky. His time at Kentucky was good. And he was asked about the difference between the two leagues. Of course, he doesn't really care, And he said, when asked about the difference, he said the speed, definitely the speed. You just see the athletes that are out there on the field and every week. You can't take anybody lightly. And then in the Big Ten, it's just kind of everybody's in a loaded box, I feel like. Except for some teams, you're going to spread it out a little bit. But in the SEC, everybody's fast and everybody can run. If you watch Georgia play live, maybe on TV, but live, it is amazing how fast their players are. And that's against SEC teams. When you watch Georgia and Michigan play in Miami, that game was not competitive because there was nowhere for Michigan to run. They couldn't run through Georgia. Everybody knew that ahead of time. That was just not going to happen. Really, nobody ran on Georgia this past season, and in 22, I'm not sure a lot of people are. But they couldn't run around them. See, that became the real problem for them. And that was the problem for Clemson, too. Clemson usually has some guys that can run. This season, not as much, right? And so that's what you see when all of the top recruits are going to the same places. They're going to Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. But Ohio State wasn't there to play Georgia on New Year's Eve. That makes me wonder. I called a buddy of mine just after that game. And the way Georgia beat Michigan was wrong. And it made me, and a little bit still, but it made me at the time really question, well, how good is Ohio State? If Oregon is beating them at the Horseshoe and just beating their brains in, if that's what it is, and then Michigan does it to them at the end of the season, what's all this hubbub about Ohio State about? Now, I'm not a Ohio State hater. I'm not, one of these guys that, a lot of y'all just cheer on beating up the Big Ten, come what may. But it's not. Nobody thinks it's a better league than the SEC. I mean, that's 35 years ago that you could legitimately make that argument. Yeah, I said 35. What has that league done? Okay, what Michigan won the national championship when they didn't have to play Nebraska? Nebraska would have whipped their ass that year. They'd have whipped their ass. You know it, and I know it. So what are we, what are we really talking about here? The speed is something that, perhaps with the exception of Ohio State, it just it's just not the same. I mean, Penn State is as close as you get maybe to comparing the two leagues this year. I mean, Indiana and Kentucky don't play anymore. You got the Georgia Michigan game, and you have the Penn State Auburn game. Auburn was not good. Penn State was not good either, but we were led to believe that they were good at the time. And some of us don't fall for those traps, but hey, whatever. Um, you know, when you watch these teams play, it is so clear how much faster the SEC is than its friends in the Big Ten. It's not really even, you know, it's not even something that's comparable. I mean, Auburn was not a good team, and they stuck with Penn State, who is not a good team either, again, which is why Arkansas whipped their ass at the end of the season. You know, I think Georgia's lost to Michigan State. I'm trying to think of the Big Ten team. They've beaten Wisconsin numerous times, Ohio State in 1992, Michigan this past year, Penn State in 2015, um, Purdue in 2003. It's just been there's been a litany of Big Ten teams that have had a hard time against Georgia. Some of those Georgia teams weren't that great. But I'm getting off the point, which is that what you really want to see, what you really get to see when you watch with the Big Ten run out there against the SEC, the speed is the problem. And now Georgia's got another player that's faster than everybody from last year on the roster. I mean, Arian Smith's really fast. Keely Ringo, if you forgot, is really fast. He was running. No one, Kirby, the funny part about that particular play is Kirby thought he was going to get caught from behind. That's the funniest part. Keely Ringo's not getting caught from behind by anybody. Nobody. It's just not, it's not going to happen. That guy's rolling. And no, you're not going to catch Keely Ringo. That's the difference. He grew up in Arizona, right? He's a West Coast guy, a quasi West Coast guy. Nobody's catching him. Alabama guys aren't catching him. And now Georgia's got a player faster than that. And then you talk about what Wan'Dale Robinson said today. The difference between this league and everybody else is the speed. And it's been that way for decades now. This isn't just, I mean, think back to when Georgia played Wisconsin in 1997. Think back to Robert Edwards and those guys, Mike Bobo. They're just Hines Ward running past all these guys. For every Charles Woodson, who is an epic player, there's a Hines Ward or two, Champ Bailey. I mean, for every Tom Brady, there's a Peyton Manning and I don't know, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Tim Tebow, Mac Jones. Now, those guys aren't Tom Brady as it relates to success in the NFL, but they were pretty good players in college, and they were pretty good players in the NFL, with the exception of Manziel. Okay, Cam Newton, MVP at some stage. I wouldn't have him on my team right now. It's the game's it's just gotten past him, but the speed. It's hard for people to understand just how fast these guys are until you see them flying past you on the field. TV does not do it justice. TV does not do it justice. And I'm here to tell you, Georgia just got faster. They got faster, y'all. Think about that.